To celebrate the 25th anniversary of Fallout, which has already passed by the time this video is released, I wanted to look into what significant events took place on October 23rd, 2077, which, funnily enough, is my first real-life anniversary. The day started out quite in tame across America, with life in the late 2070s going on as normal, as far as the civilian population was concerned. The milkman had already started his route, but most people had this lazy Saturday off to relax after a long work week and were watching the morning news who droned on and on about the war with China over their morning cup of coffee. This includes our family of interest in the suburbs of Boston, Nate and Nora, who were planning on taking their newborn son Sean to the park later in the day. However, before they could, a knock came at the door. It was a Voltec representative who informed Mr. Nate that because of his service to his country, he had been selected to participate in the Societal Preservation Program and his family had a slot in the newly constructed Volt 111. This was a common experience on that fateful Saturday morning across the United States, a sense of peace and stability in a war-torn world. But unbeknownst to the majority of the population, events that were set in motion months ago were coming to a head. Earlier that morning, first contact was made at 12:03 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, when the US Pacific Fleet identified multiple Chinese submarines off the California coast and were tracking them for some time as they positioned themselves around major cities. While at the same time, one or maybe more Ghost Fleet stealth submarines were doing the exact same thing off Boston Harbor and across the eastern seaboard that the Navy didn't know about. 3.5 hours later, at 3:37 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, a squadron of high-altitude Chinese bombers were sighted flying over the Bering Strait. These were the only known military contacts in the early hours of the day and only served to heighten tensions as the military scrambled to counter the Chinese and continue the war effort across the Eastern Hemisphere, going as far as to ignore multiple rebellions brewing in America itself and vastly different and unrelated places. Roger Maxson had declared his unit's desertion from the US Army 3 days prior after the discoveries of horrific human experimentation at the Mariposa military base they were assigned to, and was waiting for the Army to attack and reclaim the facility at this time. He would eventually create the Brotherhood of Steel, and on the other side of America in West Virginia, the anarchist Free States were already holed up in their bunkers around Harper's Ferry awaiting the apocalypse. In Sunnyvale, California, the Platinum chip was scheduled to be delivered to an anxious Robert House later in the day, who was already in a stasis chamber and had been using his vast array of assets to monitor the global situation in its quickly deteriorating state from the heart of his prized possession, the Lucky 38 Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. Around 8 a.m. EST, children from the early dawn elementary school in DC went on a field trip to Little Lamplight Caverns with teacher and parent chaperones, where they explored the many dark passages, but they all avoided the back half of the cave system, which was off limits and a part of Vault 87. While at the same time, downtown LOB Enterprises is being raided by the FBI for seditious activity, mainly providing weapon and research to the Chinese that resulted in a brutal shootout within their building. Across the East Coast, people waited outside supermarkets for the great release of Nuka-Cola Quantum, which is being released at this time. The soda was advertised as having twice the calories, twice the carbohydrates, twice the caffeine, and twice the taste over standard Nuka-Cola, America's favorite soft drink. This revolutionary and luminous drink was supposed to sweep through the markets with its eye-catching electric blue glow and had been greatly anticipated for some time by its highly dedicated fans. At 9:13 a.m., the Integrated Operational Nuclear Detection System detected 4 missile launches and put America into DEFCON 2. 4 minutes later, at 9:17, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, confirmed the launches and alerted the president, who ordered a retaliatory strike at 9:26. Nuclear detonations were confirmed in New York and Pennsylvania at 9:42. And by 9:47, most American government facilities had stopped responding. My God. Except in Las Vegas, which was spared because of Robert House's preventative measures. Even though he was missing the Platinum chips' upgraded software, which was still in Sunnyvale, his automated defenses were able to stop 68 of the 77 nuclear weapons aimed at Las Vegas and the surrounding areas. However, the strain put on the systems were immense, and he would fall into a decades-long coma after the Lucky 38 suffered a system crash. While in the streets, the citizens of Las Vegas cheered in celebration. Most vaults across America alerted their residents less than half an hour before the bombs falling, but many did not heed the warning because of the cry wolf effect, which saw residents ignore the warnings because of the many previous false alarms or failed to make it in time before the doors closed. Other vaults simply didn't get warning until the very last minute, 111 being the prime example. Nate and Nora were one of the lucky few who did make it into 111, being the last group to ride the elevator down right as the world above them was engulfed in nuclear hellfire. The exchange lasted for 2 hours and saw the destruction of every country across the world in a self-inflicted nuclear near genocide and what the the survivors will come to call the Great War. But this turn of events would have little effect for the top members of the US government, who were part of the Enclave and had already relocated to secure locations across America months prior to the war. The president, vice president, and most members of the cabinet were aboard the oil rig deep in the Pacific Ocean, while others like Secretary Eckhart retreated to the White Springs Congressional Bunker in West Virginia as soon as the early warnings came in. All non-Enclave personnel present in the bunker were summarily executed after its closing, even members of Congress. However, communications between other facilities like Raven Rock and the oil rig had been severed during the nuclear exchange, leaving the congressional bunker and its roughly 100 occupants isolated from the rest of the Enclave. Across Appalachia, Elizabeth Taggarty and her Army Ranger fire team, Thunder, were conducting an exercise with the Marines standing in for Chinese soldiers when the bombs fell and forced them to take shelter in a cave. Later, she would emerge and create the West Virginia chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel, with instructions from Roger Maxson, who called out to all military survivors of the apocalypse. But in the meantime, near Huntersville, the West Tech laboratory was breached and multiple experiments would escape in the chaos, later be known as the cryptids and super mutants. Around 10, after entering Vault 111, Nate, Nora, the infant son Sean, and the rest of the residents would be flash frozen in cryotubes in one of Vault Tech's many sick experiments that were launching across the nation at the time, such as Vault 12 below Bakersfield, California, which had an improperly sealing door to test the effects of radiation on a population, or Vault 75 that was meant to use eugenics on middle schoolers to create the perfect soldier, but required the parents to be removed from the experiment, i.e. executed by Vault security. In downtown Boston, the students and faculty of CIT took shelter in the university's basements, where they would eventually found a civilization focused on the sciences that morphed into the institute here. Near noon EST, the last bombs would have fallen, and the world outside was quiet for the most part. All cities that were struck were in shambles, the shockwave from multiple megaton-class weapons toppling buildings, while the immense heat sparked firestorms that consumed everything in their paths and draws in air from all directions, generating 100+ mile-per-hour gusts of wind, turning the infernos into massive vortexes of fire that pull survivors and debris through the air, all the while immense mushroom clouds from dozens or hundreds of nuclear explosions dominated the sky and blocked out the sun, turning day into night, and the only light coming from the flickering wall of flames that boils bodies of water. A few hours later, the Black Rain was started, which is a mix of ash and fall suspended in rain that pours down for days on end, but would not affect the firestorms that raged for a week or more until everything flammable was consumed from the city, mostly in the older districts. Survivors in rural areas like Point Lookout and Appalachia would be relatively unaffected on this first day, but the ash from firestorms would soon plunge their homes into darkness and shower them with radioactive fallout as the Black Rain smothered plant and animal life and poisoned lakes and rivers. But those within cities had it much worse. Many tried to find help at hospitals that were overflowing with the sick and wounded, such as Mass Bay Medical Center, which saw a massive wave of injured survivors flood into the doors that quickly overwhelmed its staff and depleted their medical stocks. While at the same time, many remaining military units across the nation quickly established martial law after the shock wore off and would often take over vital surviving infrastructure like the aforementioned Mass Bay Medical Center or Germantown Police Department to try and retain some form of order in the midst of this chaos, while others, like Colonel Ellen Santiago, would lead their men away from the smoldering cities to safety, Santiago bringing her men to West Virginia after she heard rumors about the congressional bunker there. And so the day closes out, the clock ticking away until it becomes the 24th, with the world forever changed. Every city across the nation, and world for that matter, are engulfed in flames. The vaults closing with their unwilling test subjects within, and the Enclave hidden away in their bases around the now defunct country, as the remaining military forces they used to command trying to retain some semblance of order as the world fell apart and survivors looting everything in sight. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below, and I will see you in the next video.